All right, well, our next Fuse Fellow to share her Fuse Showcase this year is Amy Lewis, Algebra 1 teacher from Weatherford ISD. So I'm going to turn it over to you, Amy, and the floor is yours.
All right, so my title I kind of did is the productive struggle. So I really focused on helping students persevere and work through complex math problems instead of just immediately seeking an answer, which is a pattern we've seen before. And I teach 9th grade algebra. So what I said in our original assignment last summer was that students often see word problems and they just give up. They also struggle to find motivation to work on problems that contain a lot of information or direction. So as soon as they see a bunch of words, they automatically think it's going to be too hard. And that could not have been more spot on this year. We had a little bit of a rough group of kids this year. The whole school kind of agreed that just had a lot of low motivation, a lot of kids who aren't even interested in graduating from high school. So it's just been a really different year as far as motivation goes. So this was a really good year to work on this. So something I asked my kids towards the beginning of the year, was in the first semester, is why do we automatically give up when we see a problem with too many words to read? And I just kind of took a summary of everything they said. So a couple of the main points is it's just too much information. I don't even know what it's asking me. It's too much to read. This is math, not English. I got that a lot. It's going to take too long. I'm just going to guess, and it looks hard. So that was the gist of what I got out of my classes. So the two problems I focused on was students often see word problems and they just give up. So the solution to that was to build confidence in them to prevent them from giving up so quickly. And then also that they struggle to find motivation to work on problems that contain a lot of information or directions. And then solution for that was provide students with tools to help them pick out the information they need and what to do with it. And I relied heavily on collaborative troubleshooting, which I feel like I used a lot this year. So to start with the building confidence in all students, something I really focused on was pointing out what they did right, no matter how small it was. It doesn't matter if it was a complex problem or a hard problem, or something like solving quadratics, and all I could get out of them was they added something correctly. I did that. I found the smallest thing I could that they did right if I really had to reach for it. I didn't point out their mistakes myself. Of course, I started doing that when I started this, but I really worked towards having them discover it themselves. I just really think it helps them understand better, and they're less likely to give up if they find their own mistake versus if I point them out, because that can be pretty defeating. Facilitating the conversation instead of dominating it. So when they would ask me for help or ask me if they got something right, I really focused on making it a conversation between the two of us instead of me just telling them what they did wrong and how to fix it. Reassuring them that it's okay to not know what to do, and then have them work on something that looks familiar to them. So I told them, if you see this long problem and you have no idea what to do, just find one thing that you think you can work with. Even if you're not sure if you're doing it right, just find something that looks familiar to you to start with. Reminding them that trying and getting it wrong is still getting them closer to not trying at all. That was something really big this year, as I told them, don't leave your paper blank. I would rather you try something and get it wrong than to not try anything at all. And then building relationships with the students and letting them know that I'm proud of them and that algebra is really hard. I think I have done pretty great with building relationships my last few years of teaching, but something I didn't do a lot was specifically use the words like I'm proud of them. For some reason, that just doesn't flow off of my tongue quite as naturally. So I really pushed myself to be, I don't know why it felt uncomfortable, but it kind of did, to just tell them flat out, I'm proud of you for doing that. And I can't believe how big of a difference it makes when you tell a kid that you're proud of them. They got really happy. So that was really helpful. So here's an example I have. Sorry, it's kind of blurry. This is a solving equations. So a kid asked me to come over. He didn't quite get an answer yet, but he knew he did it wrong. So I took a second and just kind of looked at it, which kind of makes him nervous when I'm silent for a second, but I tell him, just let me look at it for a second. So I found something I could praise him for, and I said, hey, you knew to combine your like terms. You knew that 7x was supposed to go with the 18x because x's are supposed to go together. That's great. And then something else I praised him for was the fact that he knew because a lot of my kids will just add the x's together that they see. And I said, you did great. That was a negative 7x, and you knew to flip it into a positive to move it to the other side. And then another one. So even though he wasn't supposed to add that 10 you see in the second line, I still told him that's great that you knew you were supposed to move the 10 to the other side. You knew that was supposed to happen eventually. And then the last thing I praised him for, which I think was the most important, is he knew that he didn't do something right. Like, he got to the end. He obviously doesn't have an answer yet, but he knew something was wrong. So that's the thing I mainly focused on praising him for, that it was good that he at least knew something happened. So then when I asked him how he knew he got it wrong or how he knew he made a mistake, he said, well, at the end, there's usually only one number next to the x that you're supposed to divide by. So that to me was a great point. Again, you knew you got it wrong. You knew there's only supposed to be one number next to the x. So then we kind of looked at it like that 25 next to the x probably would have looked normal to him. And I asked him what was standing out, and we kind of figured out together that 1.5 was kind of in a weird spot, which means that was our mistake. And then normally something I probably would have done in the past was to tell him right away, hey, you should have multiplied that 1.5 at the very beginning. But I just kind of let him wander with it. And I asked him, like, what do the parentheses mean at the end? And he told me, okay, parentheses mean you're supposed to multiply. And then I asked him, do you think the 25 is the only thing you were supposed to multiply it by? And then he went back a line and said, no, you probably should have done it to the 10 first. And then I kind of had to push him a little bit, but we were able to work back to, oh, I was supposed to multiply by the 1.5 at the beginning. So again, I could have just looked at this problem and told him, yeah, you got that wrong, or hey, you should have done this first. But I pointed out the stuff he did right, praised him for knowing he did something wrong, and then I kind of had a conversation with him about what happened, so we were able to figure it out together. So that's an example of a way I would have used that. Excuse me. And then persevering through complex problems was my second part. So this mainly pertained to word problems were a big one, but then again, questions that just had a lot of directions, even if they weren't word problems, just the directions looked crazy to them. I don't know. So I told him, when in doubt, underline anything with a number on it. That's something I told him, if you don't know what to do, underline something with a number on it. And we've talked about how sometimes questions have the distractor numbers, or you don't always need everything in there, but hey, at least underline anything with a number on it. And then always highlight the question, because a big one they always get confused with is, I have all this information, but I don't know what I'm supposed to do. So I taught them to highlight the question. If they really didn't know anything or what to do, circle any vocab terms that sound familiar, even if they don't know what they mean. If they know they've heard it in class before, to circle it, because we might come back to it. And then try organizing information. Something we did in algebra this year, I guess, mostly with word problems, was systems of equations. So we really talked about, even if you don't know what to do with information, or you're not sure how to write the equations yet, if you can just organize your information maybe into different sections, that could kind of piece you along. And then kind of like I said earlier, like, I really got him in the habit of, you have to try something. You can't just leave your paper blank. I'd rather you try it and get it wrong than not have you try it at all. And then one thing, especially for my higher level kids that just try to finish it really fast and circle their answer at the end, I said, once you get the answer, reread your question, and does the answer you got answer the actual question? So for example, with systems of equations, they would write their equations, they would solve them, and they'd write their point at the end, x comma y, and circle it. And then I'd ask them, go back and read the question. It's asking how many apples were there? Does 2,5 really answer the question, how many apples are there? And they'd be like, no, that doesn't make sense. So that was one way to kind of break it down to make sure they get all the way to the end with a word problem. And then a lot of the questions they'd always ask me, or I guess it's not even really a question, they would just raise their hand and tell me, I don't know what to do. So I really worked on getting them to ask me a specific question. So then it would go to, okay, how do I do this? And I said, no, that's not a specific question. If you want my help, you need to ask me for something very specific. And that took a lot of work and training for my kids, because they just wanted to ask me, how do I do this? So I kind of worked on them with asking me a specific question. Are you stuck on a specific part of it? And then with the kids that just really didn't know how to start, I got them to finally start asking me how do I start this, or I don't know how to start that. Because at least now I know they truly just need help starting the problem, or if they just need help with something specific, I don't want to waste my time helping them with something they don't need. So having them ask me a specific question, and then I also try teaching them how they can't just rely on me as soon as they get a question and wait for me to get an answer, because they'll sit there and raise their hand and they'll wait for me because I'm helping somebody else, and then they waste a bunch of time. So getting them to build their confidence and just trying something before they get to me. Usually by the time I get to them, they have their problem figured out already. So overall, I feel like from beginning of the year versus when I started this towards the end of the year, I got a lot of increase in participation. Kids were more willing to try. They were more willing to make mistakes, which means I got less blank papers because I was actually having them try something. Higher test scores, of course, that could have had other things to do with it, but I did notice that once I started doing this, my test scores started going up. Better attitude, the kids, instead of just giving up or getting mad at the problem, they really opened up to trying the problems and not getting as frustrated as they did at the beginning of the year. They felt more confident. They finally started asking me good questions. I hardly ever get anyone now that just tells me they don't know what to do. They usually have a specific questions. And of course, hopefully higher STAR scores, but that is to be determined. So some things that I would want to improve on this process for next year, I would want to definitely start this earlier, like from the first day of school, so I can kind of kick some of their bad habits before they start. And I feel like that'd probably have less training and work on my part if I start it right away versus a little bit in the school year. I have a lot of kids who will help out other students when they finish early. They really like helping people. So I want to focus on them not just, giving them the right answers, but trying to kind of work with the kids like I do, where they facilitate a conversation instead of just telling them what they did wrong. And then, of course, encouraging them to ask better questions, not what's the answer or what did I do wrong, but having them ask me something specific. And of course, I look forward to Fuse Year 2. Thank you.